people who are being smuggled are seen as just products. They are expendable in the eyes of those people smugglers, and we have to do everything we can, and we will do, to break their business model. I commend the work of my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, who has recently been to Bulgaria, where in close cooperation with our international partners in Bulgaria, we have seized boats, we have seized engines, we are breaking the business model, and we will continue to drive down those illegal those illegal small boat crossings until we have stopped the boats.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Serious organised acquisitive crime is hitting rural communities hard, with high-value agricultural equipment targeted for theft. Recently, the National Rural Crime Unit have recovered over £5 million of stolen equipment, nearly £1 million of which was recovered abroad. Construction Plant Hire Association, NFU Mutual and Construction Equipment Association have put significant funds into the NRCU. But what more can my right honourable friend do to ensure the National Rural Crime Unit have the resources they need to tackle these serious organised criminal gangs?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for the work that he's done in this area, including his private members' bill. He is absolutely right that the rural communities of this country need to be supported, and they will be. Driving down rural crime is an important area of work, and we've provided £200,000 of funding to help set up the National Rural Crime Unit. I and he and others in this House understand the terrible impact this has, and we will continue to work with the rural police forces to drive down this issue.
Anthony Higginbottom.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Burnley and indeed right across Lancashire, county lines continues to be a problem, with organised groups peddling drugs, exploiting young people with no regard for the harm they're doing, not just to the communities, but to the young people they're exploiting too. Now, Lancashire Police are making really good inroads with an enhanced road policing unit and with neighbourhood task forces, but could the Secretary of State set out what more the Lancashire Constabulary can do to tackle county lines and bring order back to our streets?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this vile type of criminality targeting the young and the most vulnerable. As part of our fight against county lines, we're investing up to £145 million in our County Lines programme, and since the County Lines programme was launched in 2019, police activity has resulted in over 4,700 county lines being closed, over 14,800 arrests, and over 7,200 safeguard referrals. We will keep our focus on this evil criminality.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, given that, shockingly, the average time it takes for a crime to be charged has trebled since 2016, will the Secretary of State embrace the Police Federation's Simplified DG6 campaign and scrap the redaction rules his government introduced in 2020 in order to cut bureaucracy, get cases to the Crown Prosecution Service more quickly, and free up officers' time to be out fighting crime?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
We are actively working with the CPS to simplify and speed up this process. I will look, of course, at the proposals put forward because, of course, we want police officers out in their communities, on the beat, tackling crime rather than doing paperwork. Important though that is.
Chris Elmore.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the police report a 25% increase in shoplifting in recent months. There is much evidence the Home Secretary will be aware that organised criminal gangs go into shops to try and steal as much as they can and target shop workers. As we approach Christmas, but not just at Christmas, all across the year, what assurance can the Secretary of State provide to shop workers that he will start dealing with these gangs and start realising that all retail crime is a problem in this country that needs tackling?
Secretary of State.
He is absolutely right to highlight this as an issue. It is one that we take seriously through Operation Pegasus. We are working through the leadership of the PCC for...
Well, there we have it, a flavour of the first question time from our new Home Secretary, and we're expecting a statement a little bit later. Let's bring in our panel. Rejoining us are the former Home Office Special Advisor Claire Pearsall and, of course, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Claire, you've worked in the Home Office. You've seen what a demanding department it can be. Is James Cleverly the man for the job?
I think he's doing a reasonable job so far. It's a really difficult department. It's so big, you were on crisis mode pretty much every single day. Whenever you went in, there was always an urgent question. Everybody wanted everything from you. I think the problem with the Home Office is it's just too large, and you need to break that down. You need to perhaps carve out immigration into its own department, because that in itself is incredibly important and very big and very difficult to deal with.
I mean, is it nearly impossible, Nigel, for one Secretary of State, now James Cleverly, to understand what's going on across all those different areas of policy?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that Claire's absolutely right, that what you ought to do is hive immigration off, make it a cabinet job. It used to be. I mean, in Claire's day at the Home Office, you were working for a cabinet minister. Now it's not. It's been downgraded. The other point of that is, if you took immigration away, you could get immigration linked up with other departments, so you'd look at it in the round rather than just be talking about bringing down the figures. You would then be able to take in the consequences of doing it, as we talked about earlier, with health and social care. So you'd liaise with other departments, and that would be the way of properly tackling immigration and taking some of the strain off the Home Office as it exists at the moment.
Do we need yet another seat around the cabinet table? I think it's up to 34 now. When we ran a global empire that spanned a quarter of the world, it was 8. Yeah,
well, things have changed a bit since we did run the world. I think that we were able to run India on something like 140 civil servants. So obviously not quite so efficient as we used to be. But yes, I do actually. I do think that it's important to do that. I know there are some cabinet jobs you might well get rid of in the meantime to make way for an immigration Secretary of State.
One might think that culture, media and sport could be relegated to a rather smaller department, perhaps not with a seat at the cabinet table.
It's not without its controversies, though, is it?
Certainly not.
BBC gives them quite a lot to manage.
Yeah, I wonder if there's... We're getting into the weeds here, but maybe a 2-tier cabinet would be necessary. Claire, what do we think the government is actually going to announce when it comes to bringing down migration numbers? We've heard so many policies being sort of floated in the press. What do you think is the most likely avenue?
If I was going to think of them as a sensible government, then you would look at perhaps the dependents. Don't snigger. I would look at the number of dependents that people are allowed to bring in. I think that the number of health and social care workers, you can't monkey around with that too much, but what you can look at are who people bring with them. It should be spouse, dependent children. It doesn't need to be aunties, uncles, grandmas, grandpas.
Is that happening right now?
There is an abuse of that system, yes. People are suggesting that because their childcare circle includes their grandparents or the lady down the road, then they can bring them in, and that's been allowed. So I think that really is going to be key to reducing down any numbers.
Shouldn't there be... because obviously if you bring in dependents, whoever they are, they're going to use services that are paid for by the taxpayer. If you arrive on day one, you haven't contributed so far to any tax that's gone to pay for these things. So is there currently some kind of surcharge in place whereby if you arrive with dependents, you pay extra to use services? So should you have immediate access to the NHS? Should you have immediate access to the state education system?
They do pay, because not only do they have to pay those visa fees, which are incredibly high, but the immigration health surcharge, which has gone up to around...
It's gone up recently, hasn't it?
It has, into sort of the £1,200 mark. I mean, when I was there, we were arguing over whether we should increase it to £400. It gives you the measure of the increase that we've had. So they aren't coming over here and not contributing. They are also working and therefore will pay tax. So they are going to contribute. They are paying a lot of money, and it's not just a one-off with the immigration health surcharge. It's an annual figure.
I think, Nigel, one of the concerns is how did we get to this type of economy where we are so dependent on high levels of immigration? That is a failure of successive governments, is it not? And now, people use the word addicted. Businesses are addicted, our public services are addicted to immigration.
Well, I mean, on the basis that when it comes to businesses, if they can take people for 20% less than they pay a British worker...
Is that good for the British people and society?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, the whole thing is that the best way forward is for British workers to take British jobs. That's absolutely right. But if you have jobs that a British worker can't fill, or if you have people waiting for an operation on a long NHS waiting list who could otherwise go back to work, you're going to have those gaps in the economy. So that's where you need migrants to fill those gaps. I mean, when it comes, I don't entirely agree with Claire about the dependents, because it depends again on the job. If we make the immigration system so inflexible that you base everything on rules, you won't be able to adjust to when the economy needs people. So if, say, in a particular sector, say in social care, the best way of recruiting people was to add a few extra dependents, fine. If it was bricklayers who are on the shortage occupation list, you might say, no, you can bring your spouse in and that's it.
But hang on, sorry to just one more on that. Just when there was a shortage of HGV drivers, for example, what happened was that the wages went up. So more people came back from retirement, British people, went and filled those jobs. Was that not the case? This is sort of supply and demand. So wages will rise in social care, maybe.
That's right.
If we don't have...
rise
and
too.
prices, exactly. Inflation, those are the costs you pay. That if you do it that way, then certainly as far as the NHS and social care goes, costs would then rise. And as a result of that, we'd either have to pay more taxes to fund it, or don't take these people, and waiting lists would then expand.
Fundamentally, isn't there an issue that we've all been skirting around here, and that's demographics? We're an ageing society, and our birth rate has been below replacement now for donkey's years. And so potentially we do have all of these skill gaps because we're not having enough young people of our own in the UK, but also there is so much greater demand for things like social care because there are so many more elderly people than ever before in this country.
There is, and I think the other side of it that we haven't looked at is going back to the great Tony Blair years, where he insisted everybody should go to university to create an aspirational nation, which I think, OK, yes, I kind of understood. But the problem is that you were sending people off to university. They weren't necessarily prepared for that. They weren't necessarily had the ability for that. And this is it. So you're not taking people into vocational qualifications. So the government is trying to reverse that with vocational qualifications. But on the other hand, you've also taken away nursing bursaries and things like that. So that end of the sector isn't as attractive to people. They are told that they must have a degree, which for some people doesn't make sense.
Also, and I don't know if this is true, but this is just a feeling I have, an inkling, let's say, if you've gone through the university system, perhaps you feel... too superior for some jobs, perhaps too good for some jobs, even though you can't get a graduate role.
And I think this is the problem, is that everybody has been told to be aspirational, and that the government wants that to mean go and get a university degree, go and spend 4 years and come out as an astrophysicist or in cyber or something like that. For some people, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work for them, and I would much rather somebody went to college or did an apprenticeship and filled those skills gaps that way, because if you are a nurse, you are fundamentally a caring person. I don't care really if you have a degree, because as long as you have passed your nursing training and you are competent, surely that has got to be the best thing. Empathy is everything in that, not their ability to do some music or some science.
But it's quite interesting on that, because in terms, we're the most, what's the word? You have, for so many jobs that you didn't used to have a qualification now. Overqualified, but underskilled.